seeing mostly briefing everybody on what's going on and what I've found so far.
Somebody's got it
well,
shared.
Yeah, there's one.
Okay, well, this is a couple items down on our agenda, so we'll put this on hold. If whoever's sharing can stop sharing, running the risk of not getting it again, but I'm sure you will.
Somebody's got it.
I guess this is obviously our first meeting since Bob passed, and I'd like to just take a minute to not say anything and just reflect. Thanks. I was surprised at how hard I took it. I mean, I knew Bob really only from our meetings. Obviously I've known him for quite a few years, but he felt like a good friend, a colleague, someone who was, always had good advice, soft spoken, got his opinion across, very non-confrontational. It really was a pleasure to have known him. And, unfortunately he was taken too soon. But he did leave quite a legacy in the town, and he'll be remembered fondly. And at some point, we will certainly do something to try to do a small part to honor him and what he's meant to this board and the town. So just keep that in mind. So I don't know if anyone else wants to say anything or just carry on.
I just thought I'd mention that it's interesting how quickly, like I walk the rail trail that's actually right near their house, right next to their house. And there was just a little bridge or something that he had apparently been instrumental in just getting the footpath fixed with a little bridge. And somebody has already, within days, had put up a sign, which has gotten quite official, that it's a memorial bridge. I mean, people's outpouring says a lot.
Agreed.
Well, I do hope they name the rail trail after him. Because he was instrumental in getting that created. And I hope that they do name it after him. Just like we have the Jim Shub Trail, I think it should be the Bob Beck Rail Trail. So.
I know there's been discussion, but I will certainly pass on the support of this committee for that.
Thanks, Brent.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you all. And as I said, we'll have an opportunity to maybe try to do something more formal as a board. Moving on to our agenda, the first order of business is just reviewing minutes from our last meeting, which Bob kindly chaired for me. I wasn't here, wasn't able to attend, and so obviously I don't have any comments. I appreciate Lauren's work and putting that together. It seems like it was, a good meeting. And if anyone has any comments, please provide those to Lauren. But was there anything, I guess, that you wanted to discuss amongst yourselves before you vote to approve?
I thought, as usual, they were very excellent minutes. Very complete and detailed. Thank you again, Lauren.
Also, someone wants the motion to approve and second. And
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
okay. All in favor? Show of hands, please. I think it's unanimous. I'll abstain, Lauren, since I wasn't there. Craig, I saw that you sent an email out with an ag committee report, but I didn't get a chance to look at it. Is there anything you feel we should know right now, or?
Yeah, I can. Kind of.
You don't need to, you don't need to. We can read the email, but if there's something that you think is particularly important, then
No, I don't think
it's up
so.
to
I
you.
think it's all in the email.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. Steve, anything to report out?
Not really anything to report because we pretty much just were at our last meeting are dealing with the bylaws for the EMC. And that's something I guess we haven't dealt with in like 20 some years. So they're revising our bylaws and trying to get that all finalized. So that's what we dealt with the last meeting. So that's pretty much it.
Okay, thank you. Spring, if you're still there, is there anything to report out from the town board?
Yes, and I am right here. There's just a lot of things going on behind me, so I'm pausing my video for a few. I have three things. One is make sure everyone is aware that we have a special hearing tomorrow night of the town board at 5:30 p.m. To discuss and vote on putting a moratorium in place on cryptocurrency mining facilities. In brief summary, there is a company that has been declined permits by the town to put in place cryptocurrency mining facility. If you're not familiar with them, you may want to check that out. Heavy energy draw, among other issues. And they're looking
Where was
to
this?
combat that. So we are going to look at putting in an 18-month moratorium in place.
Where was that proposed, Spring?
It's right on Route 13. I have to look up the exact address. Not too far from Hot Fair. So I'll look it up and put the address in chat here in a couple minutes. The other thing to let you guys know is we really need a conservation rep from this member of this team to work with on the DRYC project and be a liaison there as there's a rep from housing, but we really need a rep from this group regarding that RFP process to look at uses for that land north of the town hall. So I really want to make sure that our voices are on that committee. Oh, thank you, Andy. And I did meet with Rick Young today. No huge updates, but they are getting going with the big dam in Dryden, which is really cool if you've never been out there. It is due for its engineering review. So they're working with, they got a grant to do that, and it's a big undertaking to make sure that the dam is in healthy shape. So I get something about cameras are coming in next week, and they had to mow it in order to for it to be assessed by the engineers. I guess like any even little divot, they have to identify and remediate to keep the dam in good working order. Those are the three big things I thought were important to share with you guys. And I'll get the address, put it in chat here in a minute.
Thanks, Spring. Do you know if that RFP went out or if it's still, because I know there was, I know there was discussion a few months ago.
There was a lot of
the final
discussion.
RFP.
Yes, and I might have irritated some of my colleagues. But I don't want to misspeak. My understanding is it went out. I'm not sure if they've chosen anyone.
Okay, because I know that the Conservation Board was mentioned in that RFP as being involved with the selection and then going forward in the development of any plans.
Right. So we really need to get somebody on that team.
I think we will.
But I don't believe anybody's been chosen. I've not heard anything like that to that effect.
That no firm has been chosen. The town board's not going to. The town board's not going to pick our liaison. We're going to pick it internally, I'm assuming.
Correct.
Okay.
From what I
Now,
understand,
please.
it's Lauren here. I can't see myself, so I don't know if you can see me. The RFP initially went out to like a select few because the DRYC was doing that. It didn't receive any hits. So I think now in conjunction with planning, the planning department, it's going out to their contacts. So it's being sort of reposted. That's my understanding. As of, I think, a day ago.
Do you know what the reason for not just advertising it more globally is? Why is it
I
just being
think
sent to
initially
select?
the DRYC, or I don't want to. I know Marty was very frustrated that Ray wasn't as helpful as he could be. So the DRYC, I think, had heard about two companies, I don't know their names, and then put it on the website as well.
Okay.
When Jason got involved, I guess, that's when I think Ray helped out. So that's my understanding, but I wasn't there, so I don't want to. That's what I've heard.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lauren. You've got more of a track on that than I do. I've been waiting to hear about next steps, but I know it was, Leonardo reached out and said, we really need to get somebody from the Conservation Board engaged before next steps. I'm right here, but I'm gonna turn my camera off for a couple minutes so you're not distracted by background.
That's fine. Thank you, Spring. Thanks for that update as well. Any other reports from any other task groups? And
I can just mention that the Climate Smart group, because of this heating initiative and several others, first of all, the Dryden's been recertified as bronze in the clean energy community, Climate Smart community. And there was a lot of discussion, mainly in our meeting. We spent a lot of time wondering about the best goals for the use of what will be something upwards of 180,000
Nancy,
additional grants.
join the meeting.
And the some of the options included our discussion of possibly funding more electric vehicles. That's really got some pros and cons because the biggest gas users are also the kind of vehicles that you really can't substitute it easily at this point, things like snowplows, which are, emergency vehicles. And in participating in this discussion, a couple other people quite agree, is that we don't have the charging capacity at this point. So that charging capacity needs to go ahead in some sense of vehicle development. But the other thing is the possibility, and this is, I think, where we're looking at, and we'll be discussing next month, is energy upgrades on fire stations, which apparently is considerably needed. And lots of the fire stations are way behind in lots of their both safety, but also energy use, efficiency. So that's all under discussion. There were a number of other things that came up, but those are two of the bigger ones.
thanks, Nancy. You mentioned a rather large sum, I don't remember what the thousand is.
180,000 something.
Is that money that's available to the town, or is that money that would be available for the town to apply to for certain things?
No, it will be, it's expected to be coming in because of the clean energy community actions that have been taken, which include documenting 10 or more new installations of air source stuff. There's a couple of other things which I never have them on the tip of my tongue, but
No, that's fine. But then, so the town has the opportunity to then use this money for
climate
climate smart
energy,
stuff.
yeah.
Okay, cool.
yeah.
And
And I'm
so
sure they would
this-
be, happy to hear more from us if we had ideas.
Okay.
Yeah. And they're hoping to come in at, you get these programs, you get points for doing various things, right? And they're hoping that we can increase the numbers of points and then keep getting more money, but the programs are not necessarily going to be treated the same way in coming years. So I think there's some worry about that.
You know if this is exclusively for town use? I'm thinking of maybe partnering with the school district and seeing if we can do something to start to electrify their bus fleet, just.
I don't think it's like for town use, for town things, because in fact, the fire stations are independent. They are not town run. So these are for actions that facilitate energy efficiency in the town.
Okay.
So I'm quite certain that we can think of things that are town relevant, that are not town government.
Yeah, because there are a lot of buses that do 2 runs a day or 4 runs a day, spewing a lot of diesel fumes. So
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And by the way, I guess I should just say that I know that there's been a little bit of progress at the high school about choosing pollinator gardens, but I can't give you many details on that. They have not forgotten.
okay, good. Okay. Thanks, Ann. Appreciate that update.
Sure.
So a couple of weeks ago, Tim had reached out to me about some drainage issues on Johnson Road. I was out of the country, not able to meet with him, but he asked if he could present at our meeting tonight. So, floor is yours, Tim. Just lay out what's going on there and what you think this board might be able to help with.
All right, main thing I wanted to do tonight is just make people aware of what's happening and what we're starting to do to try and fix the problems. So the area that we're discussing is the west side of Johnson Road, going from 13 down to Freeville, to include all the area inside 366 and where the rail bed is. So I have a list of problems. The first problem that we've been notified about is Reach Out for Christ Church, which is now known as Thrive Church, has water pooling in their yard on both sides and around the back. They have historically had a problem with water intrusion, both surface and subsurface, for many, many years, ever since the facility was built. They're now having issues with water running up the inside of the block walls and into the facility, and then running down the length of the church and out the northern end into the parking lot. So that's one issue. Another issue is I just talked to the city marquis today, and the brand new culverts that the highway department put in
Tim, can I stop you for a second?
underneath the rail bed, one where the big washout was, and the second one on Cindy's property further into her huge landholding, have been blocked up by beavers almost immediately. So there's a huge lake behind the one on the property line between Cindy Marquis and Ron Samansky. And that's unbelievable, because when they put that brand new culvert in, it was a 3-foot culvert and it is completely plugged.
Wow.
Yeah, so there's a lot of water collecting there. Yeah, there you go. That's all pictures of it there, but it doesn't show the lake that's there right now. That's an older picture. But next to that, you'll see the other two large beaver ponds. That is where most of the drainage collects, all the way from 13 down to the rail bed. And the middle pond is on my property. So what I did, well, let me go through the rest of the problems first. So that's one problem. Flooding Ron Samansky's property and flooding all the way up to the second culvert and onto her smallest pasture. So her smallest pasture there in the lower left corner of the picture is now being flooded because of the beavers. Also, next to Thrive Church, on a piece of property that used to be the Zergany farm. So in the picture, you'll see Thrive Church there, and then you'll see a big row of fir trees going east to west, and that is the Rifle Club, as it says there. The property in between the church and those trees is now owned by a new landowner who put in a new driveway, big formal driveway from Johnson Road west into the back, towards the back of that property, intending to build a brand new house. Unfortunately, that land where he's going to build the house is now full of water. So he's not sure what to do with that problem. So because of all of these issues, they asked me to take a look at it and come up with some proposals that we might give to DEC, Army Corps of Engineers, Tompkins County Soil and Water, and any other agency that would be involved. That's why I wanted to try to meet with Gian, because I was told by DEC, Gene Foley, that Gian is the subject matter expert that I need to confer with. So that's why I called you, Gian.
Well, I mean, as I told you in your email, and I didn't want to, I don't work in draining wetlands. I mean, to me, this is all natural process. There's nothing wrong with this. There's nothing inherently bad with this. And I'm certainly not going to be supportive of doing anything to drain these wetlands. You know, what the board does is fine. You know, if you have consensus on that, I want to move forward with a plan, but I am in the business of restoring wetlands, restoring habitat, not draining it. I appreciate I appreciate the impacts to people's properties, but you know, if you build in a wetland, there's times of year when you might get wet. I mean, they have opportunities to call in trappers and you know, try to manage the beaver population. You know, DEC issues nuisance permits for that. I don't know why Gene Foley would have told you I'm a subject expert on wetland drainage and water control, because I'm not. And you know, I respectfully step back from being involved in this project. So what I would like to talk to the board about now is our family's been on Johnson Road for 102 years. And I can remember as a kid in the late 50s, early 60s, traveling up and down Johnson Road from 13 down to our farm. And all of the land on both sides of Johnson Road was farmland, open, dry farmland. So I went back and I found the aerial photos that are in a special digitized file at Cornell Library. Yeah. And I've got a collection of photos all the way from 1938 to today. And what you can see is it was actively being farmed. That whole region was actively being farmed from the Civil War, when they cleared all that property, until at least the 1970s. Most of the land was owned by three families. Harris Dayton and his family, Mr. Zergany and his family, and Marquis family. And then we had a 23-acre chunk in the midst of all that.
So that was all dry, open land drained by well-established ditching patterns until at least the 1970s. What happened is the Zagani stopped farming it. We stopped farming it. Ron Semensky, who took over Harris Dayton's farm, stopped farming it after Mr. Marquis took his cattle off that property, and it went into successional growth. And it's been in successional growth, according to the photos, from the 1970s until now. So after the successional growth started getting taller and taller, and eventually, like on our property, we have 60-foot poplar trees there and cherry trees now. And several beaver ponds, because once we started getting past the shrub stage, the beavers moved in. And when they moved in, that's when the problems started. And the ponds that are there now, if you look at the Google Earth maps, there are a bunch of ponds, at least 7 or 8 beaver ponds now, from the Mix Brothers Trucking Company all the way down through my property and across over to the rail bed. None of those ponds were there prior to the 1970s. So it was not an established wetland until just recently. And the beavers have created all of that. So what I was proposing to the church is to work with Conservation Board, DEC, Army Corps, whoever we need to get a plan put together to try and increase the trapping of the beavers so they're not rebuilding all of these dams over and over and over again, and then to take the dams out and see what happens to the flow in the drainage pattern. So let me describe the drainage pattern. Currently, well, not currently, even when there was farming going on, there was 2 main drainage patterns going from Route 13 down to the rail bed. And if you go to the plat maps for the town and you look at the various estuarine, wetland, the federal wetland inventory, it shows you those 2 main drainage patterns paralleling Johnson Road, going from south to north and eventually under the rail bed and into Fall Creek. So what I've been talking to the pastor about at the church is we may be able to decrease the amount of sheet flow into the church property and get rid of all the ponds that are behind the church property if we can get rid of the beavers, and then see how it dries out. In my discussions with Jean Foley today, she described that process. So we set up a meeting with Jean, her beaver specialist out of wildlife in Cortland, myself, the pastor, and another
Join the meeting.
to meet with them and talk about the types of things we might be able to accomplish if we get it permitted. So on the screen you see right now, you see Johnson Road right in the middle. And to the left of it, you see the main drainage channel, which is a small stream about 3 feet across and maybe 18 inches deep in places, that goes through all the properties down till it gets to a wetland where you see the light green area, and that is currently on property shared between India Milk and Honey Company and Dryden Produce, the 2 buildings you see there in tan. And then it flows into the 2 big ponds where the dark green is. And then across to the west towards the rail bed. So that's the main drainage pattern, but there's also been some very deep ditching put in that goes from Johnson Road at let's see, that's gonna be about a 75-degree angle into that stream. And one of them goes right from Johnson Road past Reach Out for Christ. And that was doing a pretty adequate job of funneling water from the big ditch on Johnson Road into that stream bed. But then the beavers showed up.
So
So that's the
can I ask
problem.
a couple questions? And I don't mean to be dense, but I ask questions so I learn. I'm hearing a lot of different, if I'm hearing correctly, we have multiple different issues going on. One is we have some existing and even historic buildings that are being, or potentially historic, I think those churches are pretty old, being impacted by water infiltration. Did I get that part right? The other is that
It was built in the late 80s, so it's not a
Okay.
historic church. It's
Not
a new
historic.
church.
not historic, but
But
it's a building that they use.
When they go back to 1960, I have a topographic map from 1960. And all of the buildings you see on Johnson Road in that picture were not there except 5
Right.
farmhouses. All the way
So-
from Route 13 to Freeville.
So here's the
And those are the
Here's the
historic
thing.
buildings.
one is that there are different ways to approach protecting buildings from water infiltration that are either directly on the building or within like the close landscape. So there's trenching, there's all sorts of different mitigation opportunities for protecting a building. What I'm struggling with as I'm listening is that the frustrations you were sharing about the history of the land and it being farmland, total respect, but they are the same frustrations I've heard from other people when they're talking about say the land north of the town hall that used to be farmland and fairgrounds, or land over, I've heard another landowner say, my land has now been deemed wetlands. It used to be farmland, but now I'm not allowed to do anything with it. And it's like, you're right, you can't do anything with it. That land has changed over time and it is now protected. So I think that what I'm hearing is there needs to be a real serious conversation around what is this committee's stance on this. I know that there are laws, right? Like once something is wetland, it's wetland, and that's a whole thing with the DEC. But I think we have to be careful so that we're consistent, so that we're not trying to argue for some areas to be dried out and others to be protected. We have to find some consistency around how we want to educate the community that way. And then identify, if, and maybe there are things maybe there's mitigation recommendations we can offer or recommend to homeowners I've lived it, right, where you're dealing with water infiltration. So, but I think it's tricky when we talk about recommending drying something out and the history of the land, because we need to be consistent in how we're approaching that depending on the location. So I'm not trying to be negative, I'm just sharing.
Thanks for that, Spring.
Anything
Andrew?
you said so far? The main reason I wanted to brief the committee tonight, or the board tonight, is to let them know what we're doing, what we're trying to look at, because we have no plan right now. We're just starting to investigate. I mean, I just walked that entire drainage basin just last week, just to see what's there. Where's the water collecting? Where is it flowing? What kind of vegetation is there? How bad is it?
Yeah.
And all of that. So we've got that, and we've started taking pictures of all that. I now know where the big ditches are. I know where most of the ponds are. And you can't do that with just satellite photography. You got to go out there and look at it. What the church has asked me to do is to use my expertise from being here on the board and, you know, teaching at TC3 to try and help them navigate through all this. Same as the landowners next door. They've tried to pool their resources with the church. I've talked to the Marcuses, I've talked to the Semanskis, I've talked to my wife about what's currently happening and what they would like to see happen. So that's where we're at. Another reason for me to bring it to this panel is for me to drain your brains on what you know, because I'm not a wetland expert by any means. And I mean, I used to be an investigator for the EPA, but not in wetlands. I was in spills. So I'm trying to get smart by talking to all of you. And if you've got input, I would love to hear it. And that's why I wanted to meet with Gian to say, okay, you talk to Dryden about all of their drainage problems. And we have been working on the wetland behind the fire station and the delineation of all that. So I'm slowly getting smarter on wetlands, but I need to be a whole lot smarter about it. So that's where we're at, and that's where we're coming from. And I don't need a consensus or any decisions from the Conservation Board. I just need advice.
Andrew, do you have a comment? Your hand's been up for a while.
I have a question that I think maybe you can answer, Gian. It's my understanding that historically there was a large swampland that I think was called the Great Etna Swamp or whatnot, and it runs all the way from 366 and Etna. And we incorporated all that farmland, and I believe some of it's now under a conservation easement. The area that's sort of behind the state police barracks to the west, I believe that's all under Finger Lakes Land Trust easement now. But my understanding is that extended all the way, probably even beyond Johnson Road, because it captured the flow coming off of the hills and the overflow of Virgil Creek. So at one point that was all wetland. We can debate when, right? But is that right? That's my understanding from talking to people in town.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know the extent of it. I don't know that it's mapped super well, but most of that stuff
you're talking about is still in existence.
Well, I think, Tim, the point is that
between the trailer park and the CLC school and the police, behind the police barracks, it's a huge wetland, and it empties out underneath the rail bed, what used to be the rail bed, right at Etna Lane, and goes under Etna Lane and then over into another wetland, which is the what's it called? the Etna wetland that's right there on 366 and empties, boom, right underneath the highway there.
My point is, I think these are all interconnected wetlands.
So yeah,
When you
that's
mess with one, you're going to mess with the rest of them.
As far as I know. And CLCS, now called Willow Glen School, was given a permit to put in a huge observation deck out into the swamp with a boardwalk. And they're using it for their environmental ed now. So they take students out into that wetland and the Pine Highlands to the north of that wetland as part of their environmental ed.
So I'm not a regulator, and I don't pretend to know the wetland regulation laws very well. I think it's probably not debatable that historically, before farmers came to the area, those areas were more wet than dry. We have had a history of ditching and draining, and we still do it to this day. I mean, there's still farmers putting tile
Join the
out in
meeting.
fields every day. And as far as I know, most, then the federal term is prior converted wetlands, have no protection under any environmental law. I think where the trouble gets is when farms are abandoned, land's allowed to go fallow and 20, 30 years passes. And then someone comes in and says, well, this was farmland and I should be able to drain it. You know, it's now a regulated wetland potentially. Most of these wetlands probably don't have any protection under federal law because of, you know, recent Supreme Court rulings. But the DEC, you know, potentially as a result of that ruling has made their wetland protection laws more robust. You know, wetlands used to have to be delineated or had to be in the regulated wetland category for DEC to regulate. My understanding now is that any proposed development in an area that might be a wetland needs to be delineated by, you know, a licensed delineator, and then if it is deemed to be a wetland, then would have to undergo, you know, Article 24 review with New York State DEC permits. Again, I am mentioning all that not as an expert in those laws or regulations, but that is my understanding of the current situation. So from a federal perspective, probably a lot of these wetlands aren't regulated by the Army Corps, but there's potential that DEC, and obviously if Jean Foley has agreed to meet with you out there, then she thinks that there's some nexus to state regulation. You know, the bigger issue, well, there are lots of issues here, and Spring, you know, mentioned several of them. You know, we have a history of questioning and wondering why our highway department digs ditches the way they do, why they chose to put a lateral ditch in well off their right of way into a private property behind a church, you know, is a question that's legitimately to be asked of them. And, you know, if that's potentially causing problems, is there something that they should do to rectify those problems? Maybe, but I don't know. I don't know the complete history of that. I don't know who dug that ditch or why they dug that ditch. But you know, it sounds like that ditch is an area that's attracted beavers, presumably because there's flow in there, and you know, the beavers decided to make a home in there. You know, again, if the solution, you know, one of the things Spring suggested, you know, trench drains and drainage around the house is one of the issues in that area. Is everything's so flat that you can't really drain it without actively pumping it because there's nowhere to send the water to. And the beaver, when they do build up these impoundments, are, you know, basically flattening the landscape even more, making it harder to drain. So, you know, probably from a water management perspective, the best thing to do would be to try to trap the beavers out and remove those dams. But again, that's not something, you know.
I agree. What we have done already is the church got a permit last year to have a wildlife specialist come in and trap the beavers. And they weren't gone very long. They came right back. So one of the things that Gene said today was, well, when you meet with us in August, the wildlife guy's gonna have to give you another beaver permit. And I said, well, I hope so, because they keep coming back. So that, what you said just earlier about the highway department, I got a real earful from Cindy Marquis today about what Jack and the highway department did along the railroad bed. You know that I've briefed you before on the rail trail problems, and one of them was that big washout at the end of the Freeville owned section of the rail bed. And I was actually there when that washed out, and it was a farmer who was trying to remove some beaver paraphernalia from the big culvert, and his backhoe unfortunately moved the culvert, and boom, in seconds it was gone. The whole thing washed out. It had been that way for 30 years. So the highway department went in there because of the right of way and because they were putting in the cable for the fiber optics, and filled that back in, put the two big culverts in, and went onto Cindy's property and did it again. So that was all done without her knowledge. And when she met Jack out there just recently, she had a talk with him about that. And said, since you put these in here, why are you not keeping them cleaned out so that the water flows through there? Because not only is my property adjacent to Ron's property being flooded, but now my pasture, which is adjacent to the second set of culverts, is flooding also. And what are you gonna do about it? And she did not get a satisfactory reply from our highway department. So those are some of the issues that the highway department did do construction without the knowledge of the landowners. And the, as I briefed you earlier, they also did all the construction over off of Hallwood Road, behind the big buildings over there. Okay. So if I interpret the photos, the aerial photos correctly, one of the big ditches that goes off at an angle from Johnson Road towards Fall Creek has been there a while. And you can see in that photo some of the old the patterns of the Civil War ditches. And I think that photo's from 1938. I can walk my property and show you the Civil War ditches. They're still there. They filled in a lot, but they're still there. So I've gotten a real education about the Army Corps of Engineers delineation process just in the last couple of days. I thought I understood it, and I had the wetland maps from U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and I thought I found all of those that had previously been delineated until today when Gene Foley said, oh no, the Army Corps of Engineers has a database, but they do not plot all their wetlands that they've delineated and are protecting on a map. You have to look it up in the database and then discuss that with them. So she said, the 12.4 acre rule is for DEC, not for the Army Corps. Right. The Army Corps has jurisdiction all the way down to a half-acre wetland, according to Gene Foley.
Yeah.
So that's a pretty small wetland. I did find out when Tompkins County Soil and Water Conservation District agent came out to our property to help us put together a grazing plan 15 years ago in the same exact spot where the flooding's occurring right now, that what was wet then was not protected because of the washout. There was enough flow through the washout that that area was not protected. But across that big pasture, that 40-acre block, there was a Army Corps of Engineers wetland that was protected. And here's the rules you have to follow if you want to cut the timber off of that property. So we learned what we could and could not do back then. We never did implement that plan because it started flooding again. So here we are. Any input you guys can give me because you know more than I do, I would appreciate. I thank you for your time tonight. I'll try to keep you updated on what DEC, Army Corps, Soil and Water, and whoever else gets involved has to say about what's going on.
Yeah, keep us informed.
So this is a real problem.
What kind of vegetation do you have back there now?
Where the ponds are, you've got classic pond vegetation, cattails and reeds, and all the trees are dying. And but you get up a couple feet above where that mean high water mark is, when that area floods and the dams are able to contain it. You've got regular trees, hardwoods, softwoods, and tall shrubbery.
Yeah.
So it's a mix of all that.
Yeah.
I got a question. So is the knocking down of a beaver dam, is that considered draining a wetland?
Yes.
Can we do that? It is.
Gene said yes.
Okay.
Not only do you have to get a permit to trap the beavers, you also have to get a permit to knock down the dams. It's separate.
Huh, interesting. Because I mean, I
Or you
know-
can just be like the Village of Freeville and go in and do it. and not
Yeah,
Suffer
well,
any.
that's the thing. I mean, the highway department came, across the street from me.
Highway
And they
department
did
does
that.
it all the
They
time.
do it all the time. They are pushing dams over.
Well, they may have deep pockets.
Yeah.
We do not. If they catch us and find us, may not be able to handle it.
Yeah.
And what they did in Ellis Hollow is they put an additional drain in.
Sorry, I didn't hear you.
In Ellis Hollow, they put an additional drain in so that when the beavers dammed it, it didn't work. And the beavers left that area. They did dam it farther downstream, but they didn't try to
Yeah,
do
so-
right there.
One of the things that Gian was saying about history and prior ecosystem, changing ecosystem, current ecosystem. I know that the Army Corps has rules on timing about all that. How long the land's been fallow, how long the successful growth has been growing on it. I know it exists. I have not got copies of it yet, but that'll be very interesting to read when I can find it. And hopefully Gene will help me find that,
Interesting.
what you are and aren't allowed to do because it's been underwater too long.
Yeah.
And you have a question?
Yeah,
Comment?
just wanted to make a point, since there's been work on this Owasco headwater area that High School Road goes across, and they did knock down dams considerably. At the same time, the beavers have been actively moving. I mean, it's the problem is it is a moving problem, and the beaver life cycles are part of it, and you can't, what you do this 5 years will not be the same the next 5 years. The other thing is that the fix that you can often do in some big dams, which is to insert basically a low level opening that the beavers are not supposed to be able, they don't have the cognitive adaptations to figure out how to stop that down in that is dependent on how deep the water is. And if I'm going to interpret, I mean, I don't know I haven't waded around in these areas, but 3 feet is way too shallow. 6 feet is pushing shallow. To get those down where the beavers can ignore the drain down below and fail to make to make the water stop above. So those are problematic fixes, and they're temporary. They're temporary because storms can do things to them. And then the beavers, of course, have a life cycle. And what you often get is a buildup of beaver numbers, which are a lot of youngsters actually, who are beginning to dam not too far from parental dams. And then the whole bunch of beavers can basically, when they get through with eating enough trees in the vicinity that it's no longer efficient, they move.
They move on.
And so it is a moving problem. And I think that the first thing it seems to me is that everybody has to sit down and decide a little bit like everybody started. First principles, what is a wetland? What is a wetland now? What is a wetland going to be if the beavers move? And, try to kind of attune this to the changes in the wetland, but also the changes in the beaver dynamics, unless you're just going to get rid of every single beaver around and keep on shooting, which would be basically the only thing that you could do for about 6 or 8 years. You've probably got a beaver population of 11, 12, 14 beavers in some of those areas. And a lot of them are young. They're going to be dispersed, but it's going to be a dynamic problem. That's the way wetlands have always worked, is that they've gone through these changes. And I guess, that's not helpful, except to say, if one wants a solution today, it will not be a solution 8 years from now. And so it's the first principle ideas that I guess have to be really decided. I don't know, I think increased wetland protections that have come in at the state level are great. And many of our farmlands are going back, but almost all the farmlands around here were tiled. So underneath everything are tiles. And as those get displaced by any processes, then suddenly things turn wetter or make vernal pools in places that vernal pools have not been for 150 years. And, some of us are going to say, I think like you said, it's like, well, deeply, I would like to see the vernal pools. But at the other level, I certainly understand when people have existing, 50-year-old buildings and suddenly you can't use them. These are wicked problems, I guess. That's what they call a wicked problem. Somebody's going to lose. Everybody's going to lose something.
In terms of farmland, if it's been a wetland for a while and then they go and it dries out, it will then be a whole lot more fertile.
Yeah.
Put a lot of beavers in there and it'll be really fertile. It's not easy. I don't know.
Well, one of the things that I've been talking to Ron Szymanski, myself, and Cindy Marcos about is we're not upset that certain areas on our property are being inundated because it actually helps if we do start putting cattle in there. We can use some of that water to pump to some cisterns to water the cattle. So we look at that as a plus, and it's not destroying enough of the drainable land that it would take away from herd size. So the three of us agree, as long as it doesn't continue to flood our pastures so that we can't use them, we would be willing to use those bigger ponds as some form of mitigation for getting rid of the beaver ponds uphill, allowing more of the water to collect in the lowlands where we're at, instead of flooding all the barns and home sites and churches uphill. So we are looking at that. Thank you for all of your comments. That's all I got.
Don't envy you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Tim. Thanks everyone for your thoughtful advice. Far less flipped than mine. I appreciate that. I guess if I just kind of had an open forum to discuss. It's been a while since we've met. I think our underlying concerns with water management in the town remain. It's okay. Things don't seem to be changing for the better, or changing at all. But I really don't know. I'm at a loss as to what our next steps are. So I don't.
I could say that I went to that conference down at Stewart Park. I only managed to sit through the first one, which was the salt impact. And I did not manage to sit through the PFAS one. I just have a personal limit for being able to do that kind of thing. The big takeaway from the salt one was that the most pollution you get from road salt is actually from parking lots. That these cause more pollution in waterways than roads do.
Interesting.
He did more things about when you did apply it to the roads, but he had to acknowledge that most of the road crews are doing really a pretty good job of trying to maximize efficiency and not do things what one might think is wastefully, while still accounting for the fact that the road crews have to go out and address these storm issues over a long time period. So they have to start before the storm has started and continue through while the snow is piling up. So it goes through the stages when the salt is most effective, all while dealing with the fact that the buses have to be able to get to school in the morning. So anyway, the big thing was parking lots.
But Nancy, I assume that is location dependent, because I follow stuff in the Adirondacks fairly closely, and there it is runoff from the roads, which is poisoning personal wells, and parking lots are not a thing in the Adirondacks except for the bigger towns.
Right.
So was this conversation more just about here in Ithaca or New York State in general?
It was general how one applies road salt, when and where, what was the effect of road salt on snow or slush or ice, when would it be effective? Many things, because it depends on temperatures, like if you go below, I think it's 15 degrees, the salt, something like that, the slush will actually freeze. So there's a lot of issues with that. If in the Adirondacks they're having problems with it coming off, that probably also has to do with their culverts and how the wash off from the road, where does it travel to? And also, what kinds of things are going to get salted. I always understood that Vermont used sand instead of salt, but I thought that was because they tended to have those colder temperatures, and the salt was more often than not going to be ineffective, and the sand would always be there.
Yeah.
The state has a salt reduction task force for the Adirondacks because this is such a problem for them. And having lived in Vermont, yes, they use sand predominantly, not
And a
salt.
lot of times to reduce the salt, what they do is the salt sand mixture, which actually can be more destructive to everything. So yeah, people have to figure out, but I know, well, as you know, on Ringwood, we have that one spot on the top of Ringwood that if it's wet and it's cold, it's black ice, always.
I know, it's where I live.
Yes, I know, it's right next to you.
It is.
And I don't always remember that because, you're thinking everything is fine because the sun has been out and the road was clear and it's black. And you're driving up there. The one time that I had to stop and wait for 20 minutes for the tow truck to get the car out of the swamp, and the driver of that car was apologizing to all of us. I said, no. If it hadn't been you, it would have been me. I'm happy. I'm not in the swamp. Yeah, so anyway.
Was there any?
Yeah, I'll say that, I'll just let you guys know, I could talk for an hour about snow plowing and salt. It is so complicated, and it changes with every different snow. It depends on how windy it is. It depends if it's dry snow, if it's wet snow.
Yeah,
It depends on the time of day, the temperatures. It's really a difficult challenge. Yeah, everyone should stay home.
But the big problem with parking lots is that, those are then owned by businesses who are afraid of the liability issue when someone slips and falls.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you at my day job in the wintertime, one of the top injuries is people slipping. I mean, I got very badly hurt once falling, and it had only started to snow like 10 minutes before. So it's very real. It's a very real problem. So if anyone comes up with the perfect solution, please let me know, and I want to pass that on to grounds people and others.
He now manages the plan for Wegmans. He's managed to reduce their salt. I think he said he'd managed to reduce their salt application by more to less than 50%, I think, of what it had been, while still having things be effective. And I more than that, I don't remember, because like I said, I was just
I get nervous because I'm also very worried about brine on the roads.
Yeah.
And brine is so much more effective, but I don't want, I'm afraid of that. There's more and more talk. If you go someplace where they have, you know, in a big business, like putting in, especially around entryways and things like that, putting in heat coils underneath the walkways to help with stairs and things like that. I shudder at the energy consumption impacts of that, but I've been told that when you start weighing them against the greenhouse gases of plowing and snow plows and salt, that it's not, it may actually be better, but and that's something to think about from a zoning perspective in the future. But yeah,
In the
I'm
future.
just saying
if they get better-
it's a big important topic.
In the future, if they get better geothermal, then that will do it. I mean, that's how Norway, I think, they actually do their streets, their city sidewalks, everything with geothermal, but it's easy for them. Because they've got it.
Yeah, they just have to get out a shovel and dig it down a few feet. So.
So, yeah.
Was there any talk about, like salt accumulation problems, like, where like just off the road or off the parking lot, those areas getting, buildup of salt over time? Was there any talk about that?
He didn't get into that, but in part because, you get a big storm and that salt's gonna wash down.
Wash down, yeah.
And that was the problem he was talking about. And the for brine, I mean, actually, if the road crew applies the salt at a particular time during the snowstorm, it will form brine. But that has to do with the fact that they have to start first. And then they put it down and, it's, and also how heavily used is the road, because you put something on the road and it doesn't stay there over all the traffic.
Right.
So anyway, that's my take for that. And like I said, I didn't do the pieces.
Well, thanks for that update, Nancy, and glad you made it from the concert. How was the concert?
Everything was canceled.
Oh, is it raining there?
Right. Yeah, but they canceled Joe first. I found out Joe was canceled at 3, which I was supposed to be told that the Danby one was canceled at 3 also, but they didn't. But I actually found out Joe was canceled after feeding everybody and getting home, and it was 5. And I thought, oh, well, I can still make it to Mary's concert at Danby Church and get some ice cream, and I could still do my Zoom from Danby. And I got to Danby and nobody was there. And then I saw that they had canceled that at 5:30, but I'd already, I don't know, it was in like the junk mail or something. So,
Okay.
And so by that time I'm clean, I'm fed and I'm clean. And I turned on Zoom as soon as I had 3 bars on my way over here. So I've been listening to you guys. John knows I got on around what, 7:15, 7:20 I joined.
Yeah, then you're dropping off.
And then,
Yeah, we heard you come and go.
Coverage is so good around here.
We need more cell towers.
Yeah.
That was a joke. We don't.
Yeah.
Maybe we do. I don't know. Well, thanks for that. Yeah, I'd forgotten about that. I know CSI, they collect their water samples all over all the watersheds, and they haven't really shown any spikes in salt, seasonally or over time. So if salt is making it into our systems for now, it seems to be diluting to level, down to kind of background levels. It doesn't seem to be accumulating, at least in areas where they're sampling. So.
Yeah, I mean, because I do help with those samples. I do the sampling at Midline Road and over on Irish Settlement. And I've noticed that, yeah, there isn't really an increase in the chloride levels that they are detecting. And so I was wondering like, well, then where's that salt going? It's gotta be going somewhere. Is it right just off the edge of the road or parking lot? And is it just accumulating there and all of a sudden we're gonna get to a time when plants are just not gonna grow there anymore along the edge of the roads? Or, you know, what's happening to all that salt? If it's not in the water, where is it?
Yeah, and I wonder how roadside plant communities are affected by that salt and how much of them are, you know, just somewhat tolerant and taking it up and, you know.
Right.
Well, there's certainly a
Alicia-
gradient from the road edges of really kind of stunted looking plants always on down. I worry
Spring,
about,
quick question. What time is this tomorrow? It's at 7 o'clock at the town hall?
5:30.
5:30. Well, that's earlier than I
Yeah,
thought.
and it's
7
gonna
o'clock, I
be
would have shown up
fairly,
and nobody's there.
yeah, it's fairly brief because it's just simply to get a moratorium basically in place.
Are you looking for comments from the public or just pretty much announcing it and moving on?
We have to put in a resolution, get comment, and then vote. So, I'm feeling pretty confident that, we have been getting already comments in writing. But if you, I don't worry that I'm feeling pretty confident about how the town board is feeling they want to vote. So we have to do it, I think, by tomorrow in order for it to be in time.
But it's at the town hall at 5:30, right?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You need any more support coming in to help you at the town hall? People saying yes?
Thanks, Nancy, for asking what I was alluding to.
It's always great to have comment. I'm always very jazzed by people showing up and speaking up. But I don't want you to worry that if you don't make it. I believe that we're all pretty confident that we need a moratorium in place. That's why we're rushing this in.
Yeah, good. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Be good. Not you, that's sorry.
Yeah. I notice you seem to be hot. I was figuring that you've probably got it up to tropical temperature for your animals.
I couldn't tell you what the real temperature is, but full disclosure, about 8 o'clock every night, it gets very warm for me. So
Well, thanks, everybody. I don't have anything else. If don't know if anyone else does. Well, enjoy your staycation, Ann, and we'll see. Well, so August. Typically, we don't have a meeting in August. In the past, we've had picnics, something like that. I don't know if there's any interest. I don't know. The last Tuesday of the month is the 27th. The week before whatever the fall holiday is, end of summer holiday, Labor Day. I guess if there's interest in having some kind of picnic gathering, you know, just we've had it at the Dryden Reservoir before, and you know, just a community place would be nice. So if there's interest, you know, just shoot out an email saying you're interested, and if we have enough interest, we can have a kind of pass a dish type meeting. So I'm fine either way.
Shall we just share with everybody our opinion, or do you want to collect?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Who's in favor of meeting in 27th at the Dryden Park, little town park there at the reservoir for a little pass a dish?
Yeah.
Sounds.
Okay, so moved. Sounds like we'll have a outdoor meeting. Well, it won't be a meeting, will it? Right? It's not going to be a meeting, Laura?
I'm not taking minutes.
I don't have a minute. but I don't know what the rules are about gatherings, whether technically it is a meeting because there's a
Yeah,
certain
we'll
number of
have to
people
call
there.
it a meeting because there'll be 3 or more of us
Yeah.
together. So you have to list it as a meeting.
Yeah.
Anyway, so
Yeah.
so I will put up a spreadsheet or something on a shared forum that people can sign up what they want to bring and you know, just see what other people are bringing and bring something different. Do we have dietary restrictions here? Any severe allergies we should be aware of?
Nope.
Nobody's
Okay.
gluten free? I'm surprised.
I'll expect some lamb
He
kebabs,
has a lot of
Nancy.
sugar, but
What? Are
I
you?
expect lamb kebabs, Nancy.
Wait, Spring, did you say you were gluten free?
No, I was saying, I'm sorry, but I've got to go. So I will bring something and I will see you guys later.
Yeah, it's too bad you
Bye,
can't
everyone.
find those parrots. That would be.
I can bring the parrots to the picnic.
It wouldn't be
They-
risky? It wouldn't be risky in case they get
We
out?
take them camping, we take them hiking, we take them out on boats and kayaks. No, we've got a method.
Okay,
I'll bring the birds.
okay.
Bye.
Yeah, everyone, thanks.
All right. Here, bye.
Oh, okay. We wanna first and second it?
yeah, I'll first it.
I'll second it.
Okay, there we go. Adjourned.
So what did I miss at the very beginning? Probably ag, but I read your report.
Yeah, ENC only had, our meeting was about bylaws, so.
So nothing of the, okay. And then after by the time I signed in. What were they talking?
Talking about, well, we were talking about, you know, stuff going over there on.
Johnson?
Freeville.
No, there was somebody before him. Cause the,
You'll just have to read the minutes.